At checkout lane 3, the most unexpected man stood behind the counter. Elon Musk, the billionaire tech visionary, in the simplest of disguises, a cashier's uniform. He scanned the groceries with the same mechanical rhythm as everyone else, but nobody recognized him. Why would they? With his usual sharp suit swap for a plain shirt and a name tag that read Eli, he was just another face among the crowd. And that's exactly what he wanted, an experiment to see how people treated the everyday worker, to see life from the ground level again. The day had barely begun, and already Elon felt an unfamiliar exhaustion. His hands, accustomed to crafting ideas for space travel, now moved on autopilot, scanning item after item, his mind wandering. A bravely flash of memory hit him. Have I ever spoken to the cashier when I shop? He wondered, but before he could dive deeper into that thought, a towering figure stepped into his lane. A man in an expensive designer suit, with an air of arrogance that oozed from his very posture, slammed down his groceries. The thud echoed through the silence, making a few heads turn. He didn't look at Elon, didn't acknowledge his presence as a human being. He just checked his phone impatiently. Elon began scanning the items. It was routine milk, bread, eggs, but his mind was racing. This man, there was something about him, the suit, the watch, the way he tapped his foot with impatience. Who was this guy? The supermarket felt heavier the moment the rich man entered Elon's lane. His presence was like a storm cloud radiating tension. Elon glanced at him, tall, broad-shouldered, and dripping with wealth, from his shiny leather shoes to his crisp tailored suit. Everything about him screamed importance, but he wasn't the type to engage in polite conversation. Not here, not with someone he deemed beneath him. Without so much as a glance toward Elon, the man flung his groceries onto the conveyor belt. Each item hit with a thud, the sound harsh against the otherwise soft buzz of the store. Elon instinctively reached for the first item, scanning it quickly. The man's eyes glued to his phone, never once flickering up. The man sighed impatiently as Elon scanned the last item. His impatience crackled in the air like static. Elon could feel it, could almost hear the silent accusation, hurry up. Yet Elon maintained his composure, fighting the urge to let the man's irritation rattle him. Your total is $57.84, Elon said calmly, breaking the silence that had stretched far too long. Without a word, the man slapped his gold-plated credit card onto the counter, barely acknowledging Elon's voice. Elon picked it up and slid it into the sheen, his hands moving on autopilot. It was in moments like these that he felt the strange, subtle power of this experiment. As a billionaire, he was used to people bending over backward to cater to him. Now the roles were reversed. His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp beat from the machine. Card declined. The screen flashed. Elon blinked. The card had been declined. That wasn't something he had expected. The rich man's head snapped up, his eyes dark and piercing. What do you mean, declined? His voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a whip. Sometimes the chip doesn't read properly, Elon offered, his voice steady despite the man's growing anger. You can try again. The man grabbed the card with a scowl, his knuckles turning white as he shoved it back into the reader. This time, he swiped it hard, almost as if forcing it to work would change the result. The machine beeped again. Declined. The rich man's face flushed an angry red, his jaw tightening as he snatched the card from the machine. His expensive watch glinted under the supermarket lights, but for the first time, it seemed like the gleam of wealth couldn't save him. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from pure, unfiltered rage. What the hell is wrong with your machine? His voice boomed, drawing the attention of other shoppers. A few customers glanced over, curious, but most quickly looked away, not wanting to get involved. Elon remained composed. There's nothing wrong with the machine, sir. It could just be an issue with your card. Would you like to try another one? The man's glare was like daggers. His ego was clearly bruised. In his world, things like this didn't happen. He was used to people obeying him, to technology bending at his will. But here, in this small moment, he was powerless. With a muttered curse, the man rifled through his wallet and pulled out another card, sleek, black, and gleaming. He thrust it toward Elon without a word, his eyes narrowing with frustration. Elon calmly took the card and swiped it through the reader, the silence stretching thin between them. The tension was palpable now, every second feeling like an eternity as the machine processed the payment. The machine beat, approved. Relief flashed across the man's face, but it was quickly replaced by a sneer. He grabbed his bags with more force than necessary, sending a carton of eggs tumbling to the floor. He cracked open on the tile, yolks spilling out in a messy pool. The man didn't even blink. Instead, he kicked a can of soda toward Elon, his lips curled in disdain. Elon stood still, his hands gripping the counter. And he'd said to see people's true colors, but this was something else entirely. For a moment, he considered revealing himself, telling the man exactly who he was, that the so-called cashier was, in fact, one of the richest men on the planet. But Elon didn't say anything. Instead, he watched as the man started out of the store, his ego restored, leaving a mess of broken eggs and spilled soda in his wake. Elon watched the man walk away, leaving chaos in his wake. Other customers looked on in awkward silence, unsure whether to help or speak up. But Elon remained still. He wasn't angry. No, this was something else: disappointment, sadness, a reminder of the very reason he was standing behind this counter in the first place. But as he bent down to pick up the fallen items, something unexpected happened. The rich man, so caught up in his own importance, walked straight into another customer, a middle-aged woman with a tired face and a toddler in tow. The impact caused her to drop her own groceries, scattering them across the floor. The man barely glanced back. "That's where you're going," he muttered, his tone dripping with disdain. The woman didn't say anything. She bent down, picking up the scattered items, her eyes tired but resigned. Elon's heart ached watching her. That was, what do you come here to see? How the everyday person navigated a world filled with people like the rich man. As the automatic doors slid shut behind the rich man, silence returned to the store, but it wasn't peaceful. The air felt thick with something Elon hadn't quite expected, a deep sense of disillusionment. He wasn't new to a world of arrogance or entitlement. He had witnessed it firsthand at business meetings and among his own peers. But this was something entirely different. Standing there in that humble cashier's uniform, Elon felt a sting he hadn't felt in years. Not from the man's words, those were easy to dismiss, but from the reality that came crashing down around him. How is this what people deal with every day? The indignities, the disrespect, the constant belittling from those who deem themselves superior? Matches and the truth settled heavily in his chest, a weight he wasn't sure how to carry. For so long, he had lived in a world where people smiled at him, catered to him, admired him, but behind those smiles was their resentment, bitterness. He thought of the countless cashiers, waiters, cleaners, and service workers he had interacted with over the years, never once truly seeing them. As he bent down to pick up the broken eggs, his hands moved slowly, deliberately. The yolk smeared across his fingers, cold and sticky. He could have called someone else to clean it up. He was, after all, still Elon Musk, even in disguise. But something stopped him. This wasn't just about spilled eggs anymore. It was about understanding a life he had never fully comprehended. Elon straightened up, his gaze shifting to the other cashiers around him. They were young, tired, some barely out of their teens, with dull eyes that spoke of exhaustion. They worked long hours for minimum wage, handling rude customers, cleaning up after messes they didn't create, all while struggling to keep a smile on their faces. One of the younger cashiers, a girl no older than 19, glanced at him and gave a small, weary smile. It wasn't much, but it was a silent acknowledgement, a quiet understanding of what had just happened. Elon nodded back, feeling a pang of guilt deep in his chest. He had been a part of the problem for far too long. Elon's mind whirled with thoughts, emotions he hadn't anticipated. His experiment had started as a way to gain insight into human nature, but what it had given him was far more profound. And more just about observing people's behavior toward a stranger. It was about understanding the invisible struggles that so many faced every single day. He had always believed in the power of innovation, the ability to change the world through technology and forward-thinking ideas. But good was innovation if it didn't address the fundamental issues of empathy, kindness, and respect. The rich man's harsh words still echoed in his mind, but they no longer stung. Instead, they served as a reminder that success wasn't measured by wealth or status, but by how one treated others, especially those who could offer nothing in return. Elon wiped his hands on a nearby towel, his movement slow and reflective. He had more power and resources than most people could ever dream of, but in that moment, dressed as a cashier, he felt a sense of humility that money could never buy. He looked around the store one last time, his gaze lingering on the other workers who continued with their tasks, unaware of the billionaire in their midst. They didn't need to know who he was. They didn't need to know the fortune that lay behind his disguise. All they needed was respect, and he was determined to give them that, both as a cashier and as Elon Musk. The day dragged on with more customers filing through the aisles, none quite as unpleasant as the rich man, but many still treating the cashiers as though they were invisible. Elon continued scanning items, exchanging pleasantries, and observing with newfound awareness. The realization weighed heavily on him, but it also gave him purpose. If his experiment had taught him anything, it was that change needed to happen not just in the way he conducted his business, but in the way society as a whole treated its most undervalued members. Elon's mind raced with ideas as he finished up his shift. He thought of ways to implement better working conditions for his own employees, to create a culture where respect wasn't just encouraged but expected. He thought about launching initiatives that would elevate the voices of those who often went unheard. As he clocked out for the day, Elon felt a strange sense of satisfaction. That wasn't the satisfaction of closing a deal or unveiling a new product, but something deeper, a sense that he was on the verge of making a real meaningful impact. Elon walked to his car, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He had the power to make a difference, to reshape the way people thought about service and respect, and he was determined to do just that. He drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past him as his thoughts swirled. He would return to his usual life, but he wouldn't be the same man. He couldn't be. Elon Musk's car hummed softly as he pulled into his driveway, the grand facade of his mansion looming before him. Yet tonight, it felt oddly distant, as if he were approaching it from a new perspective. The man who had left that morning, the billionaire entrepreneur, the world-renowned innovator, felt like a shadow of who he was now. The disguise he had worn as a cashier had been simple, but the lessons it had imparted were anything but. He stepped out of the car and paused, staring up at the vast expanse of the night sky. The stars blinked down indifferently, distant and unchanging. How many people feel as small as those stars? He thought, overlooked, ignored. As he walked inside his home, Elon couldn't shake the faces of the workers he had met that day, the young girl who smiled despite her exhaustion, the older man with weary eyes who had been stacking shelves for hours, the cashier next to him who had listened in stunned silence as the rich man had humiliated him, all of them working hard, yet living in the shadows of society, unseen by the people they served. Once inside, Elon found himself wandering through the halls of his home, each room echoing with silence. He passed by the grand dining room where lavish dinners had been hosted, rooms filled with people just like the man who had humiliated him, wealthy, privileged, detached. He thought of all times he had sat at a table surrounded by power and influence, yet never realizing how far removed they all were from the reality of the average person. He entered his study, the familiar walls lined with books on engineering, space, and technology. His mind, usually occupied with ambitious plans for space exploration and electric cars, now dwelled on something far more grounded. He had always believed in pushing humanity forward toward a better, more sustainable future, but now he understood that progress wasn't just about advancing technology, it was about advancing humanity itself. How good was Mars colony or self-driving cars if the people building them were treated as disposable? What was the point of creating a better future if millions were left behind, still struggling, still invisible? Elon sat down at his desk, his hands running over the smooth surface as memories of the day flashed in his mind. He could still feel the weight of the cashier's uniform, the looks from customers who barely acknowledged his existence, the sting of the rich man's cutting words. But with those memories came a sense of resolve, a clarity he hadn't anticipated. This experience had opened his eyes in a way no amount of wealth or power could. He realized that real change didn't come from boardrooms or billion-dollar deals. It came from understanding the human condition, from empathy and compassion. As the hours ticked by, Elon began to write not notes for his next business venture, not plans for a groundbreaking new invention, but ideas for something far more fundamental: how to bridge the gap between people, how to create a world where every person, no matter their job or their status, felt valued. His mind whirled with ideas for initiatives, employee welfare programs, fair wages, mental health support for workers, and a campaign to encourage other business leaders to follow suit. He would create an internal task force dedicated to ensuring that his companies weren't just innovative in technology, but innovative in the way they treated people. But it couldn't stop there. What if every major company did the same? What if there was a global shift in the way the world treated its workers? What if people, regardless of their wealth or social standing, started seeing each other with empathy, respect, and understanding? Elon leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen, filled with the beginnings of what could be a movement, one that transcended wealth, status, and power. He thought of the rich man who had humiliated him. Would that man ever change? He'd see the world differently if only he knew what it felt like to stand behind the counter, to be the one serving rather than being served. The truth was, Elon wasn't sure, but he knew that he had changed, and with his influence, he had the power to inspire others to change too. He stood up, his mind clearer than it had been in a long time. Tomorrow, the world would see Elon Musk as they always had, the brilliant billionaire and a man behind Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink. But behind that familiar public face was something new, determination, not just to change the world through technology, but to change it through kindness, compassion, and respect for every human being. As he walked to his bedroom, a thought lingered in his mind: if I can change, so can the world. The house was quiet, but Elon felt a warmth growing inside him. Tomorrow would bring a new day, and with it, a new mission, one that wasn't about building rockets or colonizing Mars, but about something much more immediate: creating a world where no one was invisible, where no one was left behind. And that was a future worth fighting for. Thank you for watching this video and joining me on this thought-provoking journey. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Velvet Sovereigns to stay tuned for more impactful and uplifting tales. Together we can explore better and more interesting stories that remind us of the humanity in us all. See you in the next video.